liberal wing. As a candidate, Bush denied any litmus test for justices, but named two court conservatives, Scalia and Thomas, as his models.
People who will strictly interpret the Constitution and will not use the bench to write social policy.
If he does nominate someone like Scalia or Thomas, the opposition will be unprecedented in the history of this country.
Yet if Chief Justice Rehnquist were to retire, might the president be tempted to name Scalia chief and fill the vacancy with someone like Appeals Court Justice Emilio Garza? Opponents would have to challenge the first Italian-American chief and the first Hispanic justice.
Nobody's going to get a free pass in the United States Senate, no matter who they are. Not because of their religion, their race, their sex, or anything else.
Choosing Supreme Court justices is inevitably a political act, though Chief Justice Rehnquist hopes the court's recent involvement in politics won't be repeated. For now, the current justices all seem healthy, spirited, and engaged in their work, and there's no promise any will retire just yet. Charles Bierbauer, CNN, the Supreme Court.
And when we come back, CNN legal analyst Roger Cossack will discuss the High Court and the future as you see live pictures of marching units moving down 3rd Street, getting into position for the start of the inaugural parade. President Bush is still on the Hill. That's a wider picture. It's raining, it's cold here in Washington. People are lining the parade route, and they're going to stand fast. They're not going anywhere, nor shall we. Back in a moment.
Look, I built this entire network from the ground up. A dozen Nobel servers, a little NT, it's all dial-up access. Big corporate job. All right, Dice, go get me a bigger job. A bigger room. A bigger geekdom. Oh, yes! I start with a multi-server web farm. NT cluster, high-speed deep.
Find your own bigger geekdom on earthwebsdice.com.
Yes, it's all mine.
From case, court to gavel. Join Greta Van Susteren and Roger Cossack for Burden of Proof. Weekdays, 12:30 Eastern on CNN.
AT&T Cable.
Home and Garden.
Home and Garden TV brings you more programs featuring America's best home builders, decorators, gardeners, and craft experts. And best of all, you get it right through the cable you already have.
Home and Garden Television. Enjoy it tonight on AT&T Cable.
Serving the greater Portland area, we're AT&T Broadband.
Let's talk car repair.
Well, once you hear why service is so different here at Landmark Ford,
we think you'll be kind of excited.
Landmark has more certified master mechanics and the biggest Ford parts inventory in the entire Northwest.
If you need a rental car, we have more than 150.
And we're open until midnight.
Plus Saturdays.
Pretty exciting stuff, huh?
The award-winning Landmark Ford Service Department.
Just off I-5 in Tigard.
Get more. Spend
less.
Live Inauguration Day coverage tonight, 9 Eastern.
We are watching the 4 major branches of U.S. military service, including the U.S. Coast Guard, on the East Capitol steps, awaiting the President of the United States, George Walker Bush, and the Vice President, Dick Cheney. They will be coming out very shortly, and they'll form up to begin to lead the parade down. And once they get in front of the White House, they'll get out of the limousine, step into the presidential reviewing stand, and the parade will be underway.
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 And wet.
But wet.
Question. Every president since Jimmy Carter has walked at least part of the parade route. This will be a real challenge for George W. Bush. I was told last night he had thought of walking the entire parade route. I'm wondering whether the weather will in any way alter those plans.
Yeah, I was being told the same thing, that he really wanted to get out there and walk as much as he possibly could, given the weather. But I have to tell you, we keep the 4 of us with Bill Schneider keep looking out this window at the people lined up for the parade. They've been out there, and we feel really sorry for them because we're under a roof. We're perfectly dry and warm warm in here.
Yes, and George Bush's mother is here, so she probably brought extra galoshes. I think that that's fair to say.
Do you suppose he's wearing boots?
Well, I guess the question is what kind of boots. This is one of the rawer days we have seen for inaugurals in a long time.
We just listened to Charles Bierbauer talking about the Supreme Court, and joining us now, CNN legal analyst, a familiar face, Roger Kosek. Roger, I know you listened to Charles' report, and I know you've been doing some thinking about what George W. Bush faces when it comes to dealing with this court and how it may change in the next 4 years.
Well, you know, it's very difficult to predict also, as I learned the hard way, what the Supreme Court's going to do, but at least the conversation around here seems to be that there are 3 justices that people are thinking may retire sometime during the next 4 years, one of which would be the Chief Justice, Justice Rehnquist, perhaps Justice O'Connor, and then perhaps Justice Stevens. Question, of course, is how do you go about replacing them, particularly with such a divided Congress? I would think it will probably go conservative for conservative, less conservative for less conservative, and perhaps as much as George Bush could, a liberal for Justice Stevens. I would also think that sometime in the next appointment process, we will see the first Hispanic appointed to the United States Supreme Court. Clearly, when you think of where George Bush is from and the fact that this group has never had a member of the Supreme Court, it's clearly about time.
But as you pointed out when you started to speak, Roger, it's always dangerous to make predictions.
Yes, I learned the painful hard way during the election.
Yeah, we've all learned that lesson in different ways. We do know, though, that both O'Connor, at least O'Connor, and if I'm not mistaken, Rehnquist, have let it be known that they didn't want to step down until there were a Republican president in place. And you do have a Republican president in place now.
And of course, that brings up that old question about how political is the United States Supreme Court. It's the one branch of our government that at least is viewed by most Americans as the non-political branch. But when you hear things like that, when you hear justices say, I don't want to be replaced unless it's I'm replaced by a particular political president, political party president, and I'm sure that makes me think, how non-political is this Supreme Court? And clearly the last major decision that this Supreme Court gave, the Bush versus Gore, many arguments that was a political decision and something that, in fact, the Supreme Court historically should have never been involved in.
Roger, let me just put this on the table. When George Bush's, the father's, first appointment was Dave Souter,
right.
A judge who then Chief of Staff John Sununu assured conservatives was a home run. He turned out to be far more moderate, even maybe liberal, and a deep disappointment to the conservatives. It seems to me that just the way George W. Bush is not going to alienate conservatives on taxes the way his father did, it's entirely likely that George W. Bush's appointment to replace a guy like or a woman like Sandra Day O'Connor is going to have to at least satisfy conservatives, and they're going to vet them pretty thoroughly, don't you think?
Well, you know, obviously, Jeff, you mentioned the name of Justice Souter, and that is a sticking point in the Republicans because, as you point out, he was supposed to be a guy they could count on in terms of being a conservative justice, and it turns out that he's not that guy they can count on. But I think you can vet these guys forever and have all of the background checks and the political checks that you can find, but I think something happens to them when they become on the Supreme Court, and perhaps they rise above politics and they go right to the issues. And I think, we've seen it not only with Souter, but, as President Eisenhower said, Earl Warren was the biggest mistake he ever made, Chief Justice Warren, who was the former Attorney General of the state of California, a law and order guy, as well as a governor, and turned out to be what some people believe is a way too liberal Chief Justice. So I don't know if you can ever figure it out.
You say they rise above politics, and yet the justices were, at least in some communities, criticized for the way they handled or the way they came down on the election back in December.
Well, Judy, there is some reason for that criticism. You had the 3 most conservative justices, Thomas, Scalia, and Rehnquist, known for their dedication to states' rights, coming out and deciding that a state Supreme Court could not be the decider of how their votes were counted, whether you agree with that decision or not. But nevertheless, it was somewhat out of character for them, and I think many legal analysts would say that this Supreme Court, particularly the conservative branch, is not one that has paid a great deal of shall we say, I don't want to say hasn't paid attention to equal protection, but is not known for their equal protection decisions. So which is, of course, what Bush versus Gore was based upon. So there is room for some criticism, whether you like it or not, of that opinion.
It was interesting. We're showing a picture right now. Clarence Thomas, he came out, I think, and made highly unusual remarks. I think it was the day after the Supreme Court decision, saying, no, this was not political. We took all the constitutional and the legal aspects of this into consideration. It wasn't politics.
Yeah, and that goes to show you how they really do listen to the criticism, and they do hear what people were saying. There was, as you know, as you pointed out, great criticism of that opinion on political grounds. And here we had the unusual, highly unusual event of having a justice of the Supreme Court speaking, I think, to a group of school children, coming out and saying, you know what, politics had nothing to do with it. We based it solely on the law. That is so unusual that they ever explain themselves like this. Yet in some ways, I would suppose that the closer they can get to the people, I'm of the belief that says that's a good thing that they did that.
Roger Kosek, and we're taking our viewers right now back to Andrews Air Force Base. Right now, Bill Clinton, we think that's he, either in the car or getting out of the car, has finished shaking hands and is about to climb on board the plane. Bernie, did you say Special Forces 1?
Special Forces 1, that's what Steve Reddish, our executive producer of this live coverage, says.
And will he and Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea, you can see how hard the wind is blowing. It looks like somebody's umbrella just inverted there. They are going to fly up to New York, stay there for a few days, and I guess come right back to Washington. John King?
Well, Senator Clinton will come right back to Washington. Former President Clinton will spend some time getting his new office up and running in Manhattan. He also promised the people of Arkansas he'll spend considerable time back there as he builds what will be a $125 million presidential library. As we listened to those remarks earlier, reminded there have been so many subplots of this presidency, so many political battles, some of them about his policy agenda, many of them about his personal character. Notice he paid tribute to one man in the crowd, Senator Chuck Robb, former Senator Chuck Robb of Virginia, another Democrat who lost his office perhaps for standing too close to this president. Virginia, a conservative state, but Chuck Robb lost his re-election battle this past year to now Senator George Allen, a former governor. Remember, back in 1994, the Democrats lost the Congress. For the first time in 40 years, they lost the House of Representatives. Why? Because they stood with Bill Clinton in the health care fight. They stood with Bill Clinton passing a crime bill that included some gun control measures that hurt many Democrats and cost them their seats. This president, the subplots of this presidency, quite remarkable. As Mr. Clinton passes from power and leaves Washington, we will be debating his impact on this town and on the Democratic Party for some time. Also in the audience, quite striking, he paid tribute to John Sweeney, the president of the AFL-CIO, the labor unions that form the traditional base of the Democratic Party. Also on hand, Al Fromm, the president of the Democratic Leadership Council, the centrist group Mr. Clinton helped found to wrest the party away from the control of those labor unions, of the liberals they thought had led the party too far to the left in the 80s. So as Mr. Clinton passes away here, the debate over the direction and the fight for the control of the Democratic Party likely to play out now as the Democrats are in the unique role of being completely in the opposition to a Republican president and a Republican Congress, debating how to handle the Bush agenda, and for many Democrats debating just when to step forward and start thinking about a presidential run of their own.
Bill Clinton getting ready to walk up the stairs at Andrews Air Force Base on the east side of the Capitol, back in Washington. President George Walker Bush getting ready to walk down the stairs and get into a motorcade and proceed on to lead the parade and watch it from the reviewing stand. Bill Clinton, the first Democratic president to complete 2 full terms since Franklin Roosevelt, and he will get an annual lifetime pension, currently $157,000.
And I think, is this the first time a former president has spent 2 hours and 45 minutes in Washington after he was no longer president?
I think that's a record that's
Immediately
likely to stand for some time. I guess we should also mention, since the weather is going to be a dominant theme, I think, of our following coverage, there's a reason why nobody's ever written a song called January in Washington as opposed to, say, April in Paris. And many inaugurals have been afflicted by weather. Some of us senior citizens remember that the night before President Kennedy's inaugural in 1961, there was a humongous snowstorm. Thousands of cars, literally thousands of cars trapped in the snow.
The Army spent the night
clearing the streets.
8 inches of snow.
People walking to the pre-inaugural galas in high heels through inches and inches of snow. We remember in 1985 it was so cold Reagan's inaugural had to be held indoors. So it's bipartisan. The weather afflicts Democrats and Republican presidents alike.
Now the president and vice president, their wives, under military escort.
No umbrellas. They are going down those stairs to
Present arms now.
what will be George W. Bush's first ride, and well, it won't be the first ride. He came over to the Capitol with Bill Clinton, but this will be his first ride as president in the brand new limousine that Bill Clinton was talking about the other day. He said it's a fancier version, and I can't tell you what's different about it because there are all sorts of security things.
Well, one thing we know is the license plates will be different. Bill Clinton put license plates on that were issued as a protest by the District of Columbia that said no taxation without representation. George Bush had them removed and said he doesn't want license plates that make a political statement.
This is a working administration. This president has been taking action. Chris Black has some word for us. Chris.
Bernie, in what could be seen as a first show of bipartisanship, Senate and Republican leaders in the Senate have agreed to approve the first 7 members of George W. Bush's cabinet today. That will take place on a voice vote when the Senate comes into session shortly after 3 o'clock today. Negotiations between Tom Daschle, the Democratic leader, and Trent Lott, the Republican leader, continued almost up until the inaugural ceremony began at noontime today. Trent Lott, the Republican from Mississippi, said that they had reached agreement last night to approve the big 3, Secretary of State Colin Powell, Don Rumsfeld for Secretary of Defense, and Paul O'Neill for Secretary of Treasury. He wanted to add 3 more today, but they've added 4. Spence Abraham for Secretary of Energy, and Veneman for Secretary of Agriculture, Don Evans, Secretary of Commerce, and Rod Page for Secretary of Agriculture. That should take place shortly after 3. Back to you.
Rod Page is the Secretary.
Things are moving rather quickly.
Education.
As the president here watches the Army band go by. Let's listen.
Actually, some good news to report for the new president. In the last few minutes, the rain of which we were speaking has ebbed considerably. It's still wet out there, but the dire threats of sleet, at least for the moment, have stopped. So maybe all those references to religion in the inaugural speech had some impact.
Let's hope
Appealing
so.
to a higher power.
they're exchanging business cards. I don't think presidents do that. But he was handing the president, the gentleman was handing the president a small white card. Now this is the car. This is the new presidential limousine that Bill Clinton said he only had to ride in for a few days. George W. Bush, this is his car.
You know, even though we talk about parades, and the assumption might be they have almost no political significance, it's worth noting that Abraham Lincoln's inaugural in 1861 was the first time African Americans were ever in a parade. Woodrow Wilson's second inaugural was the first time women participated in the parade. And at John Kennedy's inaugural, he noticed an honor guard marching by, and he quizzed the military commander as to why it was all white. And that was integrated within a matter of a couple of days.
And while we're on that theme, Jeff, and as we watch the president's motorcade pull away from the Capitol, we are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about civil rights under the Bush presidency, and we are going to look as the plane carrying Bill Clinton, Special Forces 1, taxis and prepares to take off from Andrews Air Force Base, heading north to New York State.
E-learning is critical for global business. It is the future,
Centra is creating a new world
where people can interact,
collaborate, and learn.
in virtual classrooms, online workspaces,
web conferences, and e-meetings. Software that harnesses the power of corporate networks and the internet.
software to help people,
Work together.
In real time,
getting more done in less time.
Centra.
the leader in live e-learning.
If you have arthritis pain, there's reason to celebrate. It's Celebrex.
Celebrate, celebrate, come on and celebrate.
Powerful 24-hour relief from osteoarthritis pain and stiffness. Celebrex, the first arthritis medicine that targets only the COX-2 enzyme.
Celebrate, celebrate, come on and celebrate.
Celebrex should not be taken if you've had aspirin-sensitive asthma or allergic reactions due to aspirin or other arthritis medicines, or certain drugs called sulfonamides. In rare cases, serious stomach problems such as bleeding can occur without warning. Tell your doctor if you have kidney or liver problems.
Celebrate, celebrate, come on and celebrate.
Ask your doctor about Celebrex. Celebrex, the #1 selling brand of prescription arthritis medicine.
Celebrate, celebrate, come on and celebrate.
I've got this life philosophy. When you get thrown, you get right back up. So I took control with Depend Protective Underwear. It's just like regular. Same soft feel, same snug fit, and an absorbent panel built right in. So I don't have to worry. Except for the 500 head I gotta herd. Take control with Depend.
They want a war, Jack, and they're arranging things to get one.
Experience the power of Washington on a special VIP tour in the 13-day sweepstakes. Enter online at CNN.com.
Sometimes there is only one right choice.
13 days in theaters January.
This is the plane taking the Clintons to John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. It is taxied into position and will be taking off very shortly. We showed you pictures earlier of President Bush, Vice President Cheney, their wives. They got into the motorcade on the East Plaza up on Capitol Hill. Questions have been asked about civil rights under a Bush administration. Joining us for some insight, Texas Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson from the 30th Congressional District in Texas. She also is the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus. And Niger Ennis of the Congress of Racial Equality. Congresswoman, what did you hear in President Bush's inaugural address, and what were you listening for?
Well, I was listening for what kind of commitment he would be making for all Americans, because we all know the outcome of the election and the feelings that remain. I thought his speech was generally very positive, and I look forward to working with him in addressing the issues that are of major concern at this time for, I'd say, quite a percentage of Americans.
Nigeritas, how do you size up President Bush?
I'd have to say that he has started to give shape, and passion and conservatism has started to gel today. I think it's notable that one of the items that he mentioned in his speech was education. He firmly believes that the pathway to equal justice and expanding opportunity is reclaiming our schools. And it's not a surprise that his first legislative agenda item, his first initiative, is going to be expanding educational opportunities, reforming education, holding our schools accountable, and giving poor parents opportunities if those schools aren't doing the job for their children.
Congresswoman Johnson, you mentioned you found the speech positive. You look forward to working with the new president. How will you measure his commitment? It is one thing, as we all know, to say what one's intentions are. It's something altogether different to carry those out. What are you looking for? How will you measure it?
Well, we're looking for some results. First, one of the first things we want to discuss with him is making sure that no election in the future will have the same type of activity and the questioning that we've had this past one. We want to make sure that there are adequate and standardized machines and ballots throughout the country. And so in order to get beyond this, we need that commitment, and I believe he'll give that commitment. Beyond that, of course, education is number one, the quality of education. I think for every American, what we all consider quality, of course, will somewhat differ. But we're interested from preschool, primary, secondary, and higher education, so that persons who are still left out, even in Texas, can be included.
Nigeritas, as we talked to both of you, we've just been watching the parade getting underway with the president at the front of it, and that is the former Air Force One Special Forces One carrying Bill Clinton as it takes off and leaves Andrews Air Force Base. Bill Clinton leaving Washington. Nigeritas, we heard Congresswoman Johnson talk about how she measures commitment on the part of this new president. Your yardstick's different?
No, not really. I actually agree with the Congresswoman. I mean, after 8 years of race commissions and rhetoric, I believe that we are about to retire the race card and get to concrete results. I think that it is notable that the president is going to be pushing the education initiative, that he's going to not be ending affirmative action, but I believe redefining affirmative action. President Clinton talked about mending and not ending affirmative action. He never really did. I think through affirmative access, through defining it, through expanding educational opportunities for people that are left out of opportunity, he will move forward the race agenda without making it such a hot topic within public debate.
You know, let me just be clear. The last 8 years, especially did minorities and women gain. We have more jobs, we're making more money, we have more educational achievement, more home ownership. The crime is down. There is no question about the gains we made this past 8 years. One of the reasons why a significant percentage of votes did not go to Mr. Bush is out of the fear that we would return to the days where his dad was president. There is still great fear and doubt. I hope we can work together to make sure that we can alleviate these fears and doubt, but they are present because we don't want to go back.
What's so unfortunate is that with these booming economic times, which of course are the reasons why many Americans have made great progress during these years, that there's still a racial divide, that black Americans still feel more isolated in spite of the last 8 years and in spite of the symbolism and the rhetoric. It's time to retire the race card, put it back into the deck. I think that's what we're going to do, and move toward an era of results, of truly reaching those areas of the black community and the minority community and poor white community, reach out to those areas and expand opportunity through education and through racial and gender neutral agendas. You know, he was very successful, then Governor Bush in Texas, by expanding opportunity without being divisive. And I think he's going to take that success that he had in Texas with education and other initiatives and bring it to the United States Congress and spread it around our country.
Believe me, I look forward to that. Would love to see it. Believe me, I would. Let me share with you, however, that the real leader during his days as governor was a lieutenant governor who was a Democrat, Mr. Bullock. And we certainly appreciate the fact that they were able to work together. He was very fatherly toward Mr. Bush. I want to tell you, however, that gains were not made in areas where there were poor kids, and not just African-American kids, but poor kids across the board. Check the statistics. We changed benchmarks and all that, but no real progress was made. I want to see real progress. As I indicated earlier, there is no dislike for this gentleman, Mr. Bush. I happen to like him very much, but I am concerned, just as other Americans are, that he would take us back where we were when his dad was president. That was the great fear. Nobody dislikes him. He has a great personality. Well, I happen to personally like him, but what I'm concerned about, and as I represent a lot of percentages of minorities, women, and just poor people in general, is whether or not we will retreat to the days where his father was president. That's the great fear.
I'm going to have to thank you now, Eddie Bernice Johnson, the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus from Texas, the 30th CD, and Niger Ennis of the Congress of Racial Equality. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Always good to have you. This parade here in the nation's capital getting underway. Barbara Bush has just gone to the reviewing stand at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, specially constructed stand, bulletproof glass. The dignitaries are arriving. The president is in one limousine, the vice president in another, and look at this. This is the picture in Washington, the inaugural parade getting underway. Our live coverage will return in a moment.
Sunday on CNN's Late Edition, the new White House Chief of Staff, Andrew Card, plus a look ahead to the first 100 days. Sunday, noon Eastern on CNN.
To relieve the stress and anxiety of her job, Rhonda volunteers as a clown for fundraisers. And to get around, she's looking for the right car for her. VHIX.com. Want to custom build your new car? Or test drive it online? VHIX.com. Make side-by-side comparisons with similar models. Check out crash test results. Find the right car for you. VHIX.com. Roadmap to the automotive world.
At Geico Auto Insurance, we handle your claim quickly, so you don't have to bum a ride to work. Geico, a 15-minute call could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Night and day, the calls. Save me this, save me that. I'm a gecko, not Geico.
So stop calling me! Geico, a 15-minute call could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Let's talk car repair.
Well, once you hear why service is so different here at Landmark Ford,
We think you'll be kind of excited.
Landmark has more certified master mechanics and the biggest Ford parts inventory in the entire Northwest.
If you need a rental car, we have more than 150.
And we're open until midnight.
Plus Saturdays.
Pretty exciting stuff, huh?
The award-winning Landmark Ford Service Department.
Just off I-5 in Tigard.
Get more.
Spend less.
What if you could be far away and still be close to everyone and everything that's important to you? If you could talk to anyone in your family the instant you thought about them? If you could have the information you need come to you when you wanted it? And you had the power to make all the pieces of your life come together more than you ever imagined. Welcome to the future. Wireless from AT&T. Your world, close at hand.
This is CNN.
Across the street from the White House, the specially constructed reviewing stand. They're waiting for President Bush and Laura Bush to get there, but already the former President Bush, Barbara Bush, the former First Lady, are there with other family members. We caught a glimpse of the President's sister, Dorothy, Doro, I think with the lavender scarf around her neck. And there are other friends and families, and this is the picture.
And what we are
Pennsylvania Avenue.
What we're seeing here 200 years later is a bit of pomp and circumstance that began by accident. In 1801, after his inauguration, Thomas Jefferson rode on horseback from the Congress's house to the President's house. His followers and supporters fell in behind him and followed him, and
no floats. There were no floats.
No corporate sponsors, no bands, but thus was a tradition born.
But there was a parade when George Washington was president as well, because he was traveling from New York to
Right, New York was the capital of the United States in those first couple of years.
That's right.
But this route that we are seeing is exactly the same route that Thomas Jefferson followed. And as I say, as maybe Thomas Jefferson's grandmother would have said, who knew? Who knew that one of the most competitive aspects, in fact, is if you are invited to be in the parade, you pay your own way. As we're seeing today, there's no guarantee that you're going to march on the sunny skies. I know that the longest parade ever was for Dwight Eisenhower in 1953. The Republicans have been out of power 24 years, and one of the few people remaining in the reviewing stand to watch every unit that passed by was President Eisenhower, because he knew what it meant to these people.
We can see some of the anti-Bush signs in there, references to an election having been stolen in their view. Jonathan Karl is on what we call the flash car, the vehicle that moves in the motorcade, and he can see and hear, take pictures, and report. John?
Not there.
Well, he'll come up very shortly. We're keeping an eye very closely on the middle car there to see whether or not the president steps out. John?
Limo the whole way here. It's very interesting as this
we're trying to hear John
on the parade route here. We have seen more signs protesting this election than actually praising this moment of his inauguration. Signs, you can see some over here that say shame, hail to the thief, supreme coup. But now as we move on to Pennsylvania Avenue, which is where we're headed on now, we will get to the reviewing stands where some of his supporters will be. An interesting thing to watch for if George W. Bush gets out of his limo, and we're told he very much wants to come out to greet his supporters. Look for a small detail. He's been wearing cufflinks that he got that are family heirlooms. This is a very significant moment for George W. Bush with these cufflinks, because it's actually the first time he's ever worn them. They're originally his father's Prescott Bush. They were given by Prescott Bush's grandfather to his father, then they were given by former President George Bush to George W. Bush the day that he got elected governor for the first time back in 1994 of Texas. He has never worn them, though, and he waited until this moment before finally wearing them. So here we go. Again, more signs protesting the controversial nature of this election. Signs like the emperor has no votes. The bands start playing here. Thief. Not exactly the best time for him to get out of the limo to walk down this parade route. It seems the protesters very eagerly here, not worried about the weather. Bernie, Judy, back to you.
Well, of course, the Secret Service has everything planned in protecting this official entourage, and if there's a place, they've decided on it, and the president will get out when they think it's okay for him to get out, and we'll see it.
There were two signs we should mention. One said impeach Bush. He's been president of the United States for 3 hours and 8 minutes. The other one, which I think was more directed, it said band start playing here. Someone had showed up and wanted to hear some music. It's a non-political statement.
This is this parade. Some of it is predictable. You know, the University of Texas will be here with their Longhorns. Southern Methodist University, which is where there's a sign, Lord help us. Southern Methodist University was Laura Bush's alma mater. Some of this I'm really looking forward to. According to our order of march in this parade, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir will be marching or riding in the parade. I didn't know they went in parades. There's a dog sled team. How about that? There's a group called the Red Hot Mamas, And this one is particularly going to interest a lot of viewers here, the Precision Lawn Chair Team.
That's the one I'm looking for.
I think we're all looking forward to that.
We have what we could show our audience and ourselves as we watch the parade as it's gotten underway, an animation of the parade route. Here we go. This is what it looks like as the parade makes its way up Pennsylvania Avenue from the Capitol, past these historic buildings in Washington, Memorial, the Navy Memorial, the FBI building, some of these buildings new. And as it gets closer and closer, traveling further west, if I've got my direction right, to the White House.
Then north.
Past
And
the
then
Treasury
north again,
Department.
and then right there in front of that little orange circle is the reviewing stand, where we just showed you a moment ago, former First Lady Barbara Bush, other in the Bush family and friends are waiting. There they are. Doro Bush, there is the two Bush daughters, Jenna and Barbara. Well, one of them, I can see one of them. And in a moment, they'll be joined by the second president in their immediate family, George W. Bush. 10,500 participants in this parade, representing 45 states, and we're going to be looking to see which five states are left out.
Something just occurs to me. Former President Bush has seen how many inaugural parades. He was there as vice president in 1981, in 1985. He was inaugurated in 1989. Then, of course, he went out of office after he was defeated in 1993. This will be the 5th time he's gone through an inaugural ceremony and seen an inaugural parade, both former President Bush and Barbara Bush.
Kelly Arena is down there.
Okay, we can do a show and tell if we can. I'm here on the parade route. We just saw the motorcade go by. All of these people here have gone through security checkpoints. We as press went through them as well, even though we were credentialed. Things are going relatively as planned, according to law enforcement officials here. This is the first time ever that security was this tight at an inaugural parade. That's because Secret Service is in charge. Now, there have been some arrests of some protesters, some disorderly conduct, some property damage, but nothing serious. But that does not mean that law enforcement officials have let down their guard at all. We have seen surveillance at every level. I was standing next to a camera earlier that was doing surveillance for D.C. Metro Police. There are helicopters above doing surveillance. There are undercover agents, and of course there are sharpshooters on many of the buildings surrounding us here. Also behind me, if you can see, there is a human wall of law enforcement standing 6 feet apart from each other. These cops behind me are mostly from surrounding counties, Prince George's County in Maryland right here. We have a police force that has been supplemented by most of the states surrounding Washington, from Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maryland, over 5,000 just police officers alone. That's not counting officials from 16 local and federal law enforcement agencies. Lots of intelligence going on, both ahead of this event and during this event, not only concerning the protests, but any possible terrorist attacks. Right now, there are more than 8 command centers fully manned, ready to go in case of any emergency, whether that's a lone assassin, whether that's a protest that gets out of hand, or at the very worst, a terrorist attack or a bombing. These officers have trained, as I said, for more than 8 months to deal with any contingency plan that they need to. There are also command centers, portable command centers that are around us, vans that are fully equipped for communication purposes, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency is also standing by just in case they need to come in to deal with any consequences of any major attack. This is Kelly Arena live on the parade route.
And who could imagine 50 years ago when Harry Truman used to leave the White House for his morning walks, accompanied, I believe, by one, perhaps at most 2 Secret Service agents, that we would come to a point in a day that celebrates freedom that we also have to look over our shoulder and build a progressively bigger and bigger wall between people and the pageant. To me, it gets more this way every new cycle.
And yet, George W. Bush, as president, says he wants to at least consider removing the security barricade on the west front, the north front of the White House, which was put up after the Oklahoma City tragedy.
There's a picture.
That's an anti-fur demonstrator, actually. Yes. Bush in, fur out, and I believe the sign is all that young woman is wearing.
All right.
The parade is underway here in Washington. When we come back with our live coverage, we're going to discuss a Bush administration's military policy.
The internet helps you reach millions of customers around the globe. But who's keeping you in touch with the internet?
Fujitsu. The possibilities are infinite.
Athletes in the world head back to Australia to once and for all prove who's best. See the 2001 Goodwill Games from Brisbane on TNT, where the world's best prove it. Brought to you by Qantas Airlines.
A pleasure to see you again, sir. Your usual seat?
He's here. He's here. He's here. He's here. Come on, Robert. Watch this girl. I'll take care of the eucalyptus soup. I remember the stuff for the best.
It's lovely to see you again, sir.
Once you've experienced Qantas business class, nothing else will do.
If the value of your home has risen during the last couple of years, now may be a great time to refinance and cash out some of your equity. Just log on to ditech.com or call us at 1-800-71-FIX. Today's low fixed rate is only 6.875%, APR 7.042% with 0 points. And there are no upfront fees. It's smart money from ditech.com. Apply online or call us now at 1-800-71-FIX.
Was one of the smaller things we changed.
People who've come out to watch on this wet, dreary, cold, raw day in Washington, D.C. He's in that car, which is creeping along there. And this is a look again at some of the people who've come out to watch.
And our intelligence reports tell us the rain, at least for the moment, has stopped.
And a very considerate gesture by the Bushes and the Cheneys to move slowly to be seen by these people who've been freezing and who are soaking wet.
Exactly, and we are keeping a close eye here because even though the rain has stopped, it's still raw out there. And yet we know George W. Bush had told the people around him he wanted to walk originally the whole route, or at least a good part of it. Now of course, we want to see whether he's able to walk any of it or chooses to walk any. Of course, he's able to walk if he wants to. One of the things that came up during the campaign as a criticism of the previous administration, largely voiced by Dick Cheney, the vice president, but also by George W. Bush himself, was a criticism of the state of the military. At one point, Dick Cheney saying that the military under the Clinton administration had fallen to its lowest state of readiness. It was a theme that kept coming back again and again, particularly at the Republican convention last summer. Our Jamie McIntyre, who covers the Pentagon for us, has taken a look at how military policy may be different under this new president.
The Bush administration has pledged to disentangle the U.S. military from open-ended peacekeeping missions, increase pay to troops, and buy them better weapons, all while building a multi-billion-dollar system to defend against ballistic missiles.
I will seize this moment of opportunity to build the military of the future.
Mr. Bush's agenda could require a hefty hike in the $300 billion defense budget, potentially far more than the $45 billion promised the Pentagon by the new president.
He identified some particular things he wanted to see were funded. He priced them, and he mentioned the price tag. I do not believe that he suggested that was the totality of what he had in mind.
Mr. Bush has also promised to skip a generation of technology to leapfrog ahead in high-tech weaponry. That has the military brass worried their pet projects could be in the crosshairs, including expensive weapons still in development, such as the Air Force's F-22 stealth fighter, the Navy's futuristic land attack destroyer, and the Army's mammoth Crusader heavy gun. Even the Marine Corps' V-22 tilt-rotor aircraft, already in production, could be in trouble because of 2 accidents last year that killed 23 Marines.
We've spent too much money and we've lost too many lives now to try and continue to push this technology when, in fact, we can get along fine without it.
But the biggest challenges facing President Bush may not be financial or technical, but political. One particularly nettlesome issue is the new administration's stated willingness to withdraw from the 1972 Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty in order to deploy missile defenses.
I mean, that treaty is ancient history.
America's NATO allies see the ABM treaty as the bedrock of arms control with Russia. But President Bush is convinced he can succeed where the Clinton administration failed, in making Moscow see how amending the treaty is in Russia's interest too.
They will in fact find a way in the negotiations, I don't know quite how or when or in what way, in the discussions that take place, to accept that reality.
Donald Rumsfeld, who has been out of government for nearly 25 years, admits there's a lot he has to get up to speed on. Outgoing Defense Secretary William Cohen prepared a top 10 list of priorities for the new Defense Secretary, but when he stopped, he was up to 48 priorities. Jamie McIntyre, CNN, The Pentagon.
Joining us now as we keep one eye on this parade as it makes its way down Pennsylvania Avenue going west. There's the president's car. Joining us, Admiral William Owens, a former vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. General Owens, just how difficult will it be for George W. Bush to get done what he wants to get done for the U.S. military?
Well, Judy, I think this is an interesting time for national security. I think it's a great team that we have there with President Bush and Vice President Cheney, a guy I have enormous respect for, having worked for him. And the whole team has got a great portfolio, a great resume to bring to bear here. But I think they've got a lot of challenges too. This issue of national missile defense and finding a way to convince our allies that our allies like the British and the French, as well as the Chinese and the Russians, that this is going to work out without making the relationship worse. So I think that's a big challenge. It's going to cost billions of dollars. That's a big challenge. And I think they've got a big challenge in terms of the capitalization of the military, which has been neglected in the last 8 years. So they've got their plate full, and I think the issues are probably more than 48. I think there are many issues, and they've got a great team in place to try to address these issues.
Are you saying they cannot do both, that they can't do missile defense the way they want to do it and rebuild the military?
I think it's enormously challenging, Judy. I think this is going to require a bipartisan effort. It's going to require radical changes, including the culture inside the Pentagon, including adapting the power of America's information technologies, and it's going to require that they make cuts in many areas where both constituencies and the services don't want to see them made. So I think they have their challenges in front of them, and they're certainly going to be tested, but I'm very optimistic that they'll succeed with this.
When you say power in the Pentagon, what are you referring to?
Well, you know, there's an enormous culture in the Pentagon that is inbuilt in the four services. The bureaucracy is very strong, and what it yearns for is strong leadership. I think they're putting strong leadership in the Pentagon with Secretary Rumsfeld and probably the team that he'll bring along with him. and they will have to lead the Pentagon. The Pentagon yearns for that kind of leadership, and I think that they will have to do that in order to get control of the budget, to do the things that they need to do with national missile defense, and to satisfy America and the military that we're going in the right path. So their challenges are many.
Admiral, do you foresee a major change in relations with Cuba? I ask that question because General Raul Castro, the Army general who's the brother of 74-year-old Fidel Castro, said that he hopes that President Bush will normalize relations with Havana before Fidel Castro dies.
Well, you know, Bernie, I think that probably there are many reasons why we should try to normalize relationships with Cuba. I would guess that this new administration would have some very close ties with people who have interests in normalizing relationships, and I think that I would be optimistic about looking forward to seeing a different relationship with Cuba as we go through the next 4 years.
Let me bring you back quickly, Admiral Owens, to the missile defense question. The people, whether it's Don Rumsfeld or Dick Cheney or George W. Bush himself, they argue this is something that is absolutely necessary. When you consider the kind of challenges and threats to this country coming in the years and the decades to come, why is that an argument that is so hard to make to America's allies?
Well, you know, Judy, it is a very difficult argument because not only the ABM treaty that Jamie talked about, but also when we put in place a missile defense system, we can expect that the Chinese and the Russians will also do something either to put more missiles online or to build their own system. And when they do that, that weakens the deterrent forces of our allies, the British or the French. So that is an issue with the British and the French, and I think we'll have to work on the diplomatic side with Secretary Powell to make the way so that the national missile defense can be put in place. But we need to think also about other threats that are other kinds of missiles, cruise missiles that the National Missile Defense Program won't address, and that can come in many different forms. So they really have their arms full with that as well.
Well, but they seem absolutely determined to go ahead with the missile defense system.
Well, but I have a sense, Judy, that they are determined to go ahead in a way that doesn't damage the critical relationships we have with our allies and tries to make this as acceptable as it could be possibly made with the Chinese and the Russians. But it isn't easy, and they know it isn't easy, and I'm sure they've got a lot of thoughts and plans for how they plan to go about doing this.
Well, Admiral William Owens, the former Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, we want to thank you very much for joining us on this inaugural afternoon.
Thanks, Judy and Bernard. Nice to be with you.
Pleasure to have you.
And Bill Schneider, this is something that you've been thinking about.
Well, I just returned from overseas. I was in Europe and the Middle East, and I can tell you that wherever I went, I was always asked the same two questions, two great concerns about the new president. One is his commitment to the missile defense plan. A lot of people in Europe and the Middle East see this as very destabilizing. It worries them, as the Admiral said. He's going to have to make a major diplomatic effort. The second is restraint. That seems to be the word that President Bush and Secretary Powell use a great deal, limiting American commitments in the world. That worries people overseas. I thought President Bush addressed that in his inaugural speech when he said the enemies of liberty in our country should make no mistake, America remains engaged in the world. A lot of people think he's going to discover the truth of what President Clinton used to say, that now in the post-Cold War period, America is the world's indispensable nation, which means unless the United States does something, nothing will happen. In the Balkans, that was certainly true, and George Bush's father discovered that in the Gulf. That's the great rule in the world, so the question is, how restrained can we be? How much can we limit our commitments?
They're getting closer and closer. They, meaning the president in the motorcade there, as they're passing the Treasury building and moving along Pennsylvania Avenue, the stretch going in front of the White House, and rolling right along is our man Jonathan Karl in the flash car.
That's right, Bernie. We're coming by the Willard Hotel here, a place where 4 different presidents lived, and the place where Martin Luther King stayed when he wrote his I Have a Dream speech in 1963. But what's been significant along this parade are the protests. I mean, all along the way from the moment we got out of the Capitol, this has been a gauntlet of protests. This is the first time where the Park Service has given permits for protests to protest along the parade route, and everywhere along the way, George W. Bush has seen reminders of just how controversial this election was, with people protesting the legitimacy of his victory, signs that things said re-elect Gore in '04. It's been very difficult. The protesters wanting to rain on his parade as much as the actual rain is raining on his parade, and providing again the reminders of this difficult election. George W. Bush has still not gotten out of his limousine. Part of that weather, no doubt, but also part of it because there has not been a very friendly parade route. It must be said that the supporters of Bush clearly seem to be outnumbering the actual protesters here, and they're also louder, but the protesters are more visible because they have huge signs and because they're making their presence known in every way possible. Passing the Hotel Washington now here, this is the oldest continually operating hotel in Washington, D.C. And we're again we're on 15th Street, just making the jog up here for the final run down Pennsylvania Avenue and on to the White House. Bernie, Judy, back to you.
It may well be that the people who were upset over the election have made more of an effort to get out today, at least some of them, than the folks who were happy about the election.
No, I think that's a very good point because while President Clinton certainly had his adversaries, there was no question that he had won those two elections. And I think the question is whether or not what we're seeing today is a kind of last gasp, a last call of protest, or whether or not the fact that this election was so contested is going to underlie a lot of the political debate. You know, whenever Bush put something on the table, somebody saying, you know, you didn't exactly win a mandate.
Well, Eddie Bernice Johnson, the congresswoman from Texas, started out a moment ago by saying there were positive notes in his speech, but then she went on to say there's a lot that we have yet to see once he's president. My sense is that this is not the end.
No, I think it will not be the end. I've already seen bumper stickers that say re-elect Gore in 2004. Every time Bush does something that's controversial, a lot of people are going to say, wait a minute, he didn't really win the election. He won on a technicality.
He does have one huge advantage that the three 19th century presidents who lost the popular vote and still won do not have, and that's this. He has television. He has an ability to command the stage in a way that presidents of an earlier era never did, and at least he has the potential to lay down his case and his personality and his message, even if the election was not a mandate.
Am I correct that those three 19th century presidents who lost the popular vote and won the Electoral College all served only one term?
Well, yes, you are, Professor Schneider.
I thought so.
We're told that our international viewers have joined us for this parade that has been underway for, what now, 15 minutes? West on Pennsylvania Avenue, drawing ever closer to the Treasury Building and then the White House. And we were told by our John Carl a moment ago, in the riding in the flatbed truck, they're calling it the flash car this time, that he may well get out and walk that last block or so.
Well, he's got to be careful that he not walk in an area where he's going to get booed. That's going to be, because there are so many protesters out there, that would make very poor television, very poor viewing, and newspaper pictures.
But in terms of security, the closer you inch to the White House, the more intense the security, and you leave off from the $10 to $100 a piece bleacher seats, such as these. People paid hard money for that, but when you get on this street in front of the White House, the security is very, very tight.
This is Pennsylvania Avenue as you approach the White House. This picture you're looking at here.
Our live coverage of this inaugural parade in Washington, D.C. will continue in a moment.
They stopped. Just look, they stopped just as we... The car has stopped. We think he may get out. We're back on the picture at the parade, and this is the president's car.
Well, with the agent opening the door, that's it.
There
John
he is.
King had told us this was going to happen, and it's happening. The weather in Washington, it's been raw all day long. It's been cold, it's been rainy, drizzling. And the new president stayed in the limousine coming down from Capitol Hill down the parade route, Constitution, Pennsylvania Avenue. But now he's out, and we're told that this is going to be the final hike to the presidential reviewing stand in front of the White House.
Yeah, I think it would have taken a sleet storm, I think, to keep President Bush and his wife from walking this last chunk of the journey, because, as I say, starting with Jimmy Carter, the anti-imperial president, every president has walked at least a part of the parade route, and it's just too tempting for a new president.
John Carl? John Carl, are you somewhere up there in front of the president? John King, you were at the White House.
John King, can you say something?
Well, Judy, you see, if you can look in the reviewing stand, you see former President Bush, Barbara Bush, the Bush family, the new Bush administration cabinet, all watching, as well as many supporters filling the bleachers here on the final stretch of Pennsylvania Avenue. Not raining at the moment. The new president actually has been lucky given the forecast. It's cold, it's raw, it has been raining throughout the day, but it's not raining at the moment, and this crowd, very well bundled crowd, putting all that aside now, watching the new president and his wife walk down this final stretch of Pennsylvania Avenue. A reminder that one of the debates early in the administration will be whether to reopen this stretch of Pennsylvania Avenue. It has been closed because of security concerns for much of the Clinton administration. Many want it reopened. They believe the public should be able to pass close by the White House, but as we've heard throughout the day, security obviously a concern. You see the new president, the new first lady walking down the street. They're being announced here to the crowd as they come. This part of the ritual of the transfer of power. Mr. Bush will come just these final few feet now. He's past the Treasury Department. He's now in front of his new home, of the far stretches of his new home. And as he gets to the reviewing stand, quite a poignant moment. His family waiting there, including his mom and dad, the father who was moved out of the White House just 8 years ago, his brother Jeb, the governor of Florida, other members of the Bush family, members of former President Bush's cabinet as well. Jim Baker, who was a key advisor in the Florida recount fight, Jack Kemp. A reminder to us here as we watch this parade and the festivities, a significant change of the balance of power here in Washington. There's the 43rd President of the United States, a Republican. There's his brother Jeb and his parents cheering him on there in the reviewing stand. The Republicans run Washington now. They run the White House. They also, by very narrow majorities, run the Congress as well.
John Carl, are you down there as well? We're watching a pretty extraordinary picture. The former president watching his son, the current president, walk down Pennsylvania Avenue, and we watched the brother, the governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, making a funny face and waving animatedly to his brother.
And there are two other Bush brothers, Neil and Marvin. It's just that we haven't seen them in our pictures here, but you can believe they and their wives, their children are also there at the presidential reviewing stand. How much these proud parents feel right now, Jeff?
Well, it occurs to me that, you know, you can watch your son or daughter in a school play or, you know, scoring the winning run in a high school baseball game and feel proud. I think when your son's been elected president of the United States, it has to ratchet it up a bit. It also occurs to me, you know,
I don't know. Some parents are very proud of it.
I said a bit. Judy's a proud parent as well. But one of the interesting things about the Bushes is, you know, one of the reasons why there have been far fewer books written about the Bush dynasty than the Kennedy dynasty is that the Bush dynasty has come relatively unaccompanied by tragedy. You know, the Prescott Bush was a senator, and his son became a president, and two of his sons became governors, now one is the president, but they haven't had the darker side. They haven't had tragedies, assassinations, plane crashes. They haven't had self-inflicted wounds. It's a different kind of dynasty.
George W. Bush did have a sibling, a sister named Robin, who died of leukemia at the age of 3. So that family has seen tragedy, but not of the sort.
Well, you think of the Kennedys, and it's 3 generations of triumph and disasters, and also they have, you know, there's been some self-inflicted wounds, as I said, in the Kennedy dynasty. The Bushes seem to be a less, I guess I'd have to say it's less dramatic. But they've had a heck of a record. This is the 3rd generation to occupy major office, and from what I've seen of the next generation, there's some political comers in that mix.
They also have been a very restrained and a very disciplined family.
Which may account for the lack of some self-inflicted wounds.
You know, certainly for the last 14, 15 years of his life, George W. Bush has been a disciplined man. Bob Dallek, you're back with us now.
Yep. Well, I think Jeff is quite right. It's the Kennedys, it's a saga. an extraordinary saga, going back to the immigrants, coming over, the Irish immigrants. And of course, Joe Kennedy, we were talking before about fathers and sons and how they kept Joe Kennedy in the background during that 1960 campaign. Of course, he was a very controversial figure because of the way he had performed as ambassador to Great Britain, and they wanted to keep him in the background.
I'm sorry, just to show what fate can play, when George Bush, before he was 21 and when he was a combat pilot, there's actually home movie footage of this. During World War II, his plane ditched. He was fished out of the ocean and taken aboard an American naval vessel. A slight twist of fate, and there would have been no Bush dynasty.
I just want to point out what you're seeing. If you're wondering where are the Bushes going, they're supposed to review the parade. They have gone past the reviewing stand. They are on foot. Now, protectively, the Secret Service is putting them back into this limousine. They're going to go into the White House, and then they will pop back out.
Yeah, this is a very, as you can see, sparsely populated part of the reviewing area. This is the end of 1600. That street that includes the 1600 block of Pennsylvania Avenue, and I guess they're just going to make a U-turn.
This is 17th in Pennsylvania now. Let's see whether they're going west now. If they turn left, they're going south on the west side of the old executive office building. And that appears, maybe they're aware that people are on that side on 17th Street, and they're just going to go past to give them a chance to see them.
And then come in the White House from that side.
But Bob Dallek, hold just a second. These Bushes do not like to be referred to as dynastic.
No. And the Kennedys did, and there's something else that we were talking about. The Kennedys, beginning with Joe, were masters of public relations. Joe consciously cultivated the press, creating an image. All his children, when they went off to England, it was a storied family. In a sense, they created their own myth. They created this saga, and they were very effective at doing it. And my impression is the Bushes have not worked at that. It's not been the same kind of self-conscious effort to create a dynasty. And I think you're quite right, Bernie. They don't want to be thought of as a dynastic group. The Kennedys, I think it's different.
And yet there has been, there's some evidence that in raising the children, Barbara Bush and George Bush, the father, were conscious of politics in their lives. It's not as if they set out to create another president.
Yeah, and conscious of noblesse oblige. But, you know, the same is true of Lyndon Johnson. He came from a storied background as well, and his mother came from a kind of Texas elite, and they taught him the idea that he deserved to be in public affairs and take a kind of position of leadership. So there are these different family styles that have an impact.
In Washington, the Bushes have center stage now that their son, the 43rd president, has been sworn in. And in New York, the man who left center stage has arrived at John F. Kennedy Airport, former President Clinton and his wife, Hillary. CNN's live coverage of this historic day in the United States of America will continue in a moment.
E-learning is critical for global business. It is the future,
Centra is creating a new world
where people can interact,
collaborate, and learn.
in virtual classrooms, online workspaces,
web conferences, and e-meetings. Software that harnesses the power of corporate networks and the internet.
software to help people,
Work together.
In real time,
getting more done in less time.
Centra.
the leader in live e-learning.
I discovered WebMD.
It's all done by medical people.
A site that I trust.
It's a resource that blew me away.
The chat rooms. I love the chat rooms.
And it's a way of feeling connected to people. There were success stories that inspired me.
The Healthy Fridge is great.
Weight loss buddies. I found delicious recipes.
I actually have a buddy in the diet and nutrition section.
It's a supportive way to lose weight.
And it's kind of nice to know that you're not out there all by yourself.
That's practical, real-life advice that I can use.
One company now creates internet solutions unique to you.
Fujitsu. The possibilities are infinite. Dear Clarice, are you back on the case? If so, goody goody. Because I need some action, Clarice. I need to come out of retirement and return to public life. Regards, your old pal, Hannibal Lecter.
Rated R. Starts February 9th. I discovered WebMD.
It's all done by medical people.
A site that I trust.
It's a resource that blew me away.
The chat rooms. I love the chat rooms.
And it's a way of feeling connected to people. There were success stories that inspired me.
The healthy fridge is great.
Weight loss buddies. I found delicious recipes.
I actually have a buddy in the diet and nutrition section.
It's a supportive way to lose weight. And it's kind of nice to know that you're not out there all by yourself.
That's practical, real-life advice that I can use.
If the value of your home has risen during the last couple of years, now may be a great time to refinance and cash out some of your equity. Just log on to ditech.com or call us at 1-800-71-FIX. Today's low fixed rate is only 6.875%, APR 7.042% with 0 points. And there are no upfront fees. It's smart money from ditech.com. Apply online or call us now at 1-800-71-FIX.
This is the scene at the White House. We're looking at the west lobby there. That's where visitors go to enter the White House en route to going to visit the president and the vice president. Bill Hemmer is down at Freedom Plaza, which is just a few blocks away as the parade continues coming through the streets in Pennsylvania Avenue. Bill?
Hey, Bernie, unfortunately, today the weather forecasters were indeed right on the money. It has been an absolutely miserable day here on Freedom Plaza. We're on Pennsylvania Avenue between 13th and 14th. The bleachers you see here throughout the entire area, just a few moments ago, a whole lot of people got up, Bernie, and left. They were quite patient. These people had paid about $50 per ticket to have a seat right here, and as soon as President Bush passed through here on his motorcade, a whole lot of people got up and cleared out. The Petersons are here. They are from the state of Wisconsin, came here from Milwaukee. You had a strategy today. Mr. Peterson stayed here to reserve seats. Mrs. Peterson went up for the swearing in up on Capitol Hill. And you're still here right now. You're not clearing out. Tell us why.
Clearing out. We're going to stay right till the end. We drove all the way from Wisconsin. There's no way we're leaving early.
And tell us why to the end. Certainly you've waited a long time as a Bush supporter and a Republican to see this day.
Well, because we're very pleased that W's got into the White House. We've been working for him in Wisconsin, and we're so pleased. That's why we're here.
Well, listen, stay warm, okay, because this weather's really nasty. By the way, 1937, FDR's second inauguration, 1.77 inches of rain here in Washington, D.C. I don't know if we're going to get close to that. However, it has been raining throughout the day here. One Bush supporter did tell me, Bernie, he said, you can tell America it doesn't matter what the weather forecast is today. This is the best day they have seen in 8 years' time.
Bill,
the parade is starting to come up here, Bernie. We'll wait for it shortly here. I'm sorry, you were saying?
I just want to ask you, I wonder what your guest thinks about having his governor taken away from him and packed off to Washington to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services.
I'm sorry, Bernie, I couldn't hear all of that again.
I'm wondering how the man you just interviewed feels about having Governor Tommy Thompson snatched away from the midst of the people in Wisconsin and packed off to Washington.
Yeah, indeed. Your governor, Tommy Thompson, is coming here to Washington, D.C. Your thoughts on that?
We were at his hearing yesterday. We heard him over in the Dirksen building. We heard him being questioned by Hillary. And I think he did a very good job. We're sad that he's leaving Wisconsin because we really like him. But we're happy that he's been able to join the Bush cabinet.
Gotcha. I wanted to get your wife some airtime here. Your thoughts on that as well?
Yes, we like Governor Thompson, but he'll do well under Mr. Bush.
Well, listen, you are hardy folks hanging out here today. Just about everybody's cleared out. I'd say about 10% are left here.
Last cow goes home, believe me.
Until the last cow goes home. Good for you, Mrs. Peterson. Clearly some hardy folks, Bernie, and indeed a lot of folks have waited a long time to see this occasion today. The band's starting to come up right here. We'll be here. We'll let you know what we see and hear throughout the evening here, Bernie.
And, Jeff, if you're a Republican, it's worth getting wet for.
It is, and I have to say, having spent 4 winters in Wisconsin, this is considered early spring. If you're from Wisconsin, this is nothing you don't live with pretty much every day this time of year.
U.S. Park Service police on horseback. Anybody who's come to Washington, Judy, has seen these folks on horseback and on foot.
You have to admire the dedication, though. Those folks, that family from Wisconsin, drove all the way to Washington. They're going to drive all the way back. That's something. Talked to some Republicans last night. They were greeting one another, high-fiving each other, and saying, "It's been a long time coming." And I think that's what we're hearing from these Republicans Bill was just talking to.
It just occurs to me that one of the traditions of an inaugural, and it is bipartisan, is the infliction of great pain on visitors. People come here, they spend lots of money for inaugural tickets, they spend lots of money on gowns, they hear the word inaugural ball, they think they're going to something right at Buckingham Palace. This is generally like being on a crowded subway car at 5 o'clock, foodless. And so the Petersons are actually experiencing just the first stage of what is likely to be the traditional Washington ritual.
Yeah, we encountered some Texans wandering around Woodley Park last night trying to find this ball at the Marriott Hotel. They were utterly confused, so we generously led them over there. But at sea.
No chance that election dates might get changed, Bob Dallek, and then that means inaugurations could maybe fall in the summer?
Now, there's a good idea, Judy.
And also, if I may say, it occurred to me that we should follow the Super Bowl and perhaps hold the inauguration every 4 years in a different warm weather city.
Yes.
If the National Football League can do it, I'm not sure whether the U.S. government can.
That's right. Well,
a certain amount of tradition we'd lose, however.
Yeah, and that's only 8 days away, right?
And there you go.
One of the issues that George W. Bush has been talking a good bit about since his ascendancy to the presidency, it was made clear a few weeks ago, is the economy. On several occasions, he's talked about how worried he is that the economy is going downhill, that we may be facing a recession. So the question arises, just what state is the economy in that George W. Bush inherits as he takes over the presidency? Joining us now to talk about that, Robert Hormats, a familiar face to some of us. He's vice chairman of Goldman Sachs. Bob Hormats, are we on the edge of a recession?
Well, we're not yet. I mean, we could go into a recession if American consumers who've lost a lot of money in the stock market and are concerned about a slowdown, they could retreat and pull us into recession by simply spending a lot less than they have in the past. That would be the big risk. The other risk is that the Federal Reserve does not cut interest rates sufficiently over the next several months to re-stimulate a certain amount of growth. Those are the two big risks, but we're not in one yet.
There were those who made the point, Bob Hormats, when George W. Bush started talking down the economy, if you will, that he was, in effect, by talking about it, increasing the prospect that it might happen because people's psychology would then go in that direction.
Well, it's unfortunate that he did that because you're absolutely right. The psychology that is now in the minds of many people is negative, and if political leaders reinforce that psychology, that can actually reduce the growth prospects of the economy and undermine consumer confidence. I suspect as president, he and Cheney and others will not do that. O'Neill, in his confirmation hearings, was very careful not to do that, and I think now as they're assuming office, they'll take a more realistic view of the economy and say that there is a risk of a recession, but we're not there yet, and we'll do all we can to prevent it through a tax cut and helping to encourage the Fed to stimulate the economy through lower interest rates.
Something else interesting from the confirmation hearings for Paul O'Neill, who is now the Secretary of the Treasury, having been confirmed this afternoon by the Senate. He said in those hearings that a tax cut, the size, the $1.6 trillion cut that George W. Bush says is going to be the centerpiece of at least the first year of his administration, that is not necessarily going to bring a quick benefit to the economy. And the newspapers yesterday were filled with speculation, anonymous quotes from people around Bush that he wasn't so pleased that his Treasury Secretary choice was talking like this.
Well, I think Paul O'Neill was realistic. The real way of getting the economy to grow more rapidly in the short term is lower interest rates. Fiscal policy takes some time to work. And the Bush tax cut program really is sort of back-end loaded. That is to say, the real stimulus takes place not in the first, second, third years, but the 7th, 8th, and 9th, and 10th years. And therefore, that program in itself is not going to be very stimulative. They could change it, of course. They could front-end load the tax cuts. They could make them retroactive to the beginning of this year, so people would see the benefits in lower withholding by the federal government and perhaps higher personal exemptions. That would give a little more stimulus right away, because people would see it in their pocketbooks and in their paychecks. So they'd have to change the old Bush program, make it a new one, to get it to be a stimulative one, and that really would be a difference in structure. And I think they're really relying more on the Fed to do what's needed rather than fiscal policy.
Bob Hormats, you've served in the United States government before. You've been here on Inauguration Day. In the upper right-hand screen there, we see former President Clinton and his wife, Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton. Well, I'll save that question, and let's go to this rostrum here where the Clintons are speaking.
For coming out to welcome us. And I want to thank the Freeport High School Band and the Beach Channel High School Band. Thank you both. Thanks everyone in the band for being here, both of the schools. We are so glad to see all of you and happy to be here. A lot of people made us feel very welcome, and I wish I could thank everybody in this crowd. I particularly want to thank the people who brought their signs, who reminded everybody that for 8 years, this president and administration put people first. I want to thank Judith Hope and the state committee members of the New York Democratic Party, and Congressman Jerry Nadler and Congressman Greg Meeks, Senator Marty Connor and all the state senators and members of the Assembly, the New York City Council and other elected officials, former Mayor David Dinkins, County Chair Tom Manton, New York City Public Advocate Mark Green, Dennis Hughes, Randy Weingarten. I want to thank the carpenters and the Teamsters and SEIU, the machinists and the aerospace workers, the New York City Central Labor Council.
Hillary Clinton, the Senator Hillary Clinton with her husband, they just exited the White House president, their daughter Chelsea.
Look at this picture. Here she is speaking, and he doesn't appear to have any interest in what she's saying. It seems as if his mind is back here in Washington. Look at the former president's face. And notice how Chelsea's eyes are following what her mother's saying.
Yeah, it is hard to know what's going on because
well, I just remember
we don't know what they're looking at. We can't see what's behind the camera.
There may be an old friend there. But one of Clinton's most devoted aides, who was a former journalist named Sid Blumenthal, wrote a book called The Permanent Campaign, analyzing the whole new way that politics are, that it never stops, that there's no governance. And I'm looking at this, and as we picked up the brief comments from Senator Clinton, it sounded like election night. I want to thank the Teamsters. I want to thank the carpenters. I want to thank the
head of the Democratic Party.
And it almost seems as though that title of that book was very prescient. I mean, it feels like we are in a permanent campaign.
Now the Bushes are coming out of the White House to join their in-laws and relatives and friends and parents in the presidential reviewing stand. They went into the White House to freshen up, and now they're coming out to watch the parade like everybody else. And by the way, as the parade passes the White House, we can look over our shoulders from our studio atop the Labor Department roof, and there are still hundreds and hundreds of marchers way back here on 3rd Street.
Yeah,
so
there's still a lot more to come of this parade. And Bernie, before we get any further, I want to give apologies to, or at least explanation to Bob Hormats, our guest who was talking to us a moment ago about the economy. We were in the middle of hearing from him.
I was in the middle of asking a question.
You were in the middle of asking him a question. We should apologize to you, too, when we skipped up to New York. to hear what Mrs. Clinton was saying, Senator Clinton was saying. This is the picture in front of the White House as the Bushes walk on a blue
And this is the
cover.
president's.
You see, they're not on the mud.
I just want to point out, remember I told you about the leather football